Newsday, the terror suspects arrested in Texas, appearing in a Houston court in the past hour. Now, he's accused of providing material support to ISIS. The other suspect, rounded up in Sacramento, accused of traveling to Syria to fight alongside terrorist organizations and lying to investigators about it. Now, he appears before the judge later today. Both suspects are in the U.S. as refugees. All this as Germany is rocked by what happened in the picturesque city of Cologne on New Year's Eve. Reports of police overwhelmed by mobs of migrant men and more than 100 women saying that they were sexually assaulted. At least 2 rapes reported. Cologne's police chief, we learned a short while ago, is reportedly stepping down over his handling of the situation. But it's not just Cologne. Several cities in Germany reporting similar incidents, and similar reports surfacing in Switzerland and in Finland. This is a huge story, Tucker Carlson, that has not gotten enough attention all week long, especially here in the United States, as we are having our own debate over how many refugees to take. And you've heard President Obama, Hillary Clinton, and others wanting as many as 60,000, the overwhelming majority Muslim men.
This is the kind of story that's been ignored by and large by the mainstream press, but it is being emailed between people frantically because the average person understands exactly the message, which is that immigrants bring their countries with them. They bring their culture, their language, their politics, their customs, and people who come from prosperous, peaceful, industrious countries tend to be that way, and people who don't, tend to bring those values too. So this is inevitable when you have this scale of immigration from countries in which women are not allowed to walk freely wearing revealing clothes in the public square. The most interesting fact of this is the point that the European left, as the left in America is also doing, is making apologies for this, is refusing to say the obvious, when this is a direct threat to their values, again, to the ability of women to walk unaccompanied, uncovered in the public square. This is an attack on that freedom, and they don't seem to recognize it.
Harris, why are they ignoring this story? I mean, Tucker mentions it's not gotten a lot of coverage, and I think 2 things. One, President Obama and the left does not want to look like hypocrites or like they're making the wrong decision with these refugees. And also, doesn't this story help Donald Trump?
Well, it may help in terms of his messaging and how he can then tout, I was right, I told you so, so on and so forth, and again can take credit for putting out a very important issue into the nomenclature for us. I mean, now we can say, and I'm going to quote local authorities in Cologne, women were having to walk an inebriated gauntlet of dangerous men. Imagine what that is like on a street corner. You can't get home because these guys are massing. But this is complicated because weren't we listening to Angela Merkel's phone not too long ago, or we were spying on her? I don't know that you can necessarily turn around and then talk with the friend you've been listening to and spying on and then legislate in some way. I mean, we need their help on this, and they need our help on this, because we are facing some of the same problems. We don't want to have to learn the lesson that they're learning right now. I wonder what those conversations are like between President Obama and Angela Merkel.
You know who's not ignoring this are the states that are being told that they need to take in more of these refugees. In Texas, for example, the Attorney General, the Governor have spoken already on this. The Attorney General there saying that this is a troubling revelation, especially, he points out, in light of the President's insistence on placing further refugees in my state. He says he's going to continue to press for the rights and the protection of the Texas people. So, Andrea, these states have an obligation to protect their citizens, to protect their people, and as they continue to watch these stories, they have to do more.
And it's more than just cost, too. I mean, you look at the refugees that we've allowed in so far, these 2 Iraqi refugees that were arrested today plotting attacks on the homeland. Refugees are allowed to get benefits, they're allowed to take advantage of our system, but when you think about what the administration has said, and the left has said, and even some on the right, Melissa, they share our values. Not all immigrants share our values. The values of equality for women. Women should be protected. And this is a time when you see the administration pushing police forces. I mean, you see there's multiple debates happening. And all of these refugees in the United States would drastically change the culture and, I think, endanger women.
What I think is really scary about this story when you look at this is that you don't normally think about German law enforcement as being soft, right? I mean, that's not something that comes to mind. You looked at 90 criminal complaints in Cologne, 50 criminal complaints in Hamburg. This seems like a society that you would think could handle being overwhelmed on New Year's Eve by people who are trying to be violent. I mean, really, to me, this contributes to this idea that you're not safe anywhere right now. I mean, it's really frightening.
But we have something in
they're
common
outnumbered.
with the Germans. We are passive and guilt-ridden as as they are. The cops stood by in Cologne as women were raped. They didn't intervene, just as our police stood by in Baltimore and Ferguson as stores were burned, as people were hurt, and didn't do anything because they didn't feel like they had the moral authority to do it. That's scary. That's when civilization ends, when you reach that point.
You know, can I just say one positive thing from all of this, though, with the men that they picked up in Houston, Texas, that one man, the Iraqi refugee that they picked up, and then these 2 other suspects in California. No one makes up lost ground like America, though. We got some suspects in all of this. And in fact, the one guy who had lied about international terrorism, one of the guys in California, we were watching his social media postings. So, I mean, I know it's a lot of ground to make up, but we are moving in the right direction.
As somebody who lived in France, as someone who lived in France and was assaulted in this manner 15 years ago, I can tell you, it's bad. It was bad then, it's worse, and we have to wake up because it will come here.
God bless, Andrea. The House committee investigating the Benghazi terror attacks that killed 4 Americans is questioning former Defense Secretary Leon Panetta for the very first time today. But he did something late yesterday on the eve of this big testimony that has people talking. Panetta endorsed Hillary Clinton for president. Remember, a key question expected to come was when she was on duty. She and the president, of course. CIA operatives on the ground, were they ordered to stand down when our people were under attack? Here's what Panetta said yesterday.
The role that I played as Secretary of Defense, there was never any order to stand down. On the contrary, the whole effort was to do everything possible to try to save lives. It's tragic in a number of ways, but most importantly, it's tragic because it's now become a political football that, unfortunately, I think doesn't do service to all of those that were committed to trying to protect lives.
So that was on TV. Today he's on the Hill. Earlier today, Utah Congressman Jason Chaffetz, chairman of the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee, with reaction to Panetta's comment. Watch.
There are a lot of people that believe that the Secretary of State and the State Department was not asking or requesting for that type of support as it was going down, and I think that's a question that the committee is looking very closely at. Secretary Panetta is the one person, along with General Ham, who actually met with the president, and I think they need to know what those orders were, what did the president want them to do, and why was the president seemingly not engaged.
Yeah, we have embassies, consulates, posts all over the world. We're under attack by radical Islamists who want to kill us, so we want to know how these things get handled when our people are in trouble. I'm just saying that because some people ask, why do you care? You care. You first of all care about those 4 Americans, and you certainly care about moving forward. But you said something as Panetta was talking. You said, oh, he's using a qualifier.
Yeah, he says, you know, as far as I know in my role, from what I've heard, you know, I mean, he's qualifying his statement so that he has a way to deniability later if the other becomes true. You know, one of the things he said was the problem is that the attack ended quickly, and because of time and distance, we never had the chance to get here. First of all, if that's true, why would that be? I mean, it was 9/11. This is a very hot zone. There should have been people near there. Second of all, I don't believe that. I mean, it was a 9-hour time period plus. It seems clear that they didn't move in, and the question I have is why? And that's what I honestly don't understand and can't figure out the motivation of why they didn't go and help these poor people.
And we have the emails from Hillary Clinton's server which show that Christopher Stevens had requested over and over and over and over. Do we have time for 55 more overs? For added security at this very location. Our ambassador. But it didn't happen.
Well, moving on to Panetta's endorsement of Hillary Clinton, because after listening to all of you, it makes you question, is she qualified or should she even be able to run for the presidency of the United States? But in his endorsement of Hillary Clinton, he said that her foreign policy credentials far outstrip those of her Republican counterpart, Donald Trump. When you hear people endorse Hillary Clinton, they say she's the most qualified because, well, she was Secretary of State. But they don't go on to tell us what she did as Secretary of State that qualifies her to lead us on foreign policy, Tucker. That always, to me, seems to be missing from those endorsements.
Quick, name 3 ways you made the world better. You went to some conferences in Davos. I'm impressed. But how exactly did you make the world better? No, I got to say, though, on a macro level, I do dissent from this. I think the Republicans are missing the point. I don't buy the idea that somehow some career bureaucrat or service member up and down the chain was intentionally negligent in trying to rescue these guys in Benghazi. I just don't buy that. I don't think there's any evidence of it. I think they're missing the story, which is what were they doing there in the first place for the 50th time? Republicans seem totally uninterested in that question. I think it's not only interesting as a journalist, I also think it's significant because it shows what the White House was spending its time doing, sending armed people who shouldn't have had them, destabilizing the region further. That does point directly to Hillary's
and putting them in a position where they didn't have the type of security that they would need to do
whatever. But it's a big bureaucracy. I mean, why am I making excuses for them? But it's just true. I've lived in D.C. for 30 years. It's a big bureaucracy, the biggest in human history. They make big mistakes, oversights. It's dumb, like all bureaucracies. But they're implying this is somehow intentional. That's just stupid.
Well,
get to the real point.
I think the other real point is don't let it happen again.
Yeah.
No, that is the real point, Tucker. Why didn't they show up? What was happening on the ground? We know there was over 30 CIA agents on the ground that night, and somebody, Hillary Clinton, wanted it hidden. She did not want that exposed, and that's why they didn't show up that night. And they wanted to go and fight that fight. They wanted to go fight.
All right. Thank